been a commoner or a tax collector. He'd have been non-religious. If you really want to define a publican, he'd be non-religious. He would just do what he felt like and not really be concerned about what God thought. Now, the Pharisees were concerned about being good people. Matter of fact, if you wanted to pick between a publican and a Pharisee for a neighbor, I'd want the Pharisee, to be honest with you. He might mow my grass once in a while just to be a good neighbor, and so I could take advantage of the fact that he tries to be a good person. And probably he wouldn't steal from me or take unfair advantage of me, whereas the publican would probably rip me off every chance he got and probably want me to mow his grass instead of mowing mine. Pharisee's a good guy. He was a religious person. A publican was a sinner. By the way, look at the phrase that and we're in the same context, but look at the phrase that the elder son said to, in verse 30, about his younger son. He said, "As soon as this thy son was come, which hath devoured thy living with harlots." Now, we know that the son wasted his financial resources on riotous living, but the elder son just came out and said, "Man, this guy's a whoremonger. He devoured your living with harlots, and he lived wickedly." So he goes to describe, hey, he's not just a person who's not concerned about being righteous or being a good person. He's actually somebody that is the example of wickedness. And he's an example of breaking God's law. And the accusation made against Jesus was that he was in company that he shouldn't have kept. By the way, that accusation was always made against Jesus, wasn't it? It always surprised Jesus and his disciples, or always surprised the Pharisees and the disciples of Jesus many times, the company that Jesus kept. And friend, I want us to today get an attitude from God and about the Heavenly Father that God has toward the wicked, or God has toward the lost, or even the saved who live like they're lost. Now, the first example that we see, and we didn't have time to read it, and we can't study all the way through it, but the first illustration is an individual that's lost his sheep. So Jesus is making a point to these people that are saying, you're in the wrong company. And he goes on to talk about a shepherd who has 100 sheep, and he loses one. And he leaves the 99 and he goes after the one and brings it back into his fold. The emphasis here is that every individual to God is important, but God is interested in the lost. God loves the lost. That offends us a lot of times. Does it ever bother you that you do right and then somebody else comes along and just immediately gets right where you're at? How do you like it? Okay, this will help you to understand what's bothering the scribes and the Pharisees. They've been working hard to be religious, and they feel like that Jesus ought to be devoting his attention to them because they're good people, they're religious people, and if he's a good religious man, he's going to spend his time with them. And it's kind of like you waiting in line at Walmart. I think everybody here shops at Walmart. Maybe you don't, but I do. I go to Walmart and I wait in line. I don't like it when people cut in front of me in line. There's a lot of tactics that people use to cut in line. One of the tactics a fellow used the other day was to place somebody in line and then go shop while, because the line's so long, go shop and then come by with his big pile of stuff and step in next to his friend. That's still cutting in line. It's a good tactic, though. It's really hard to argue with because that guy held a place in line while the shopping was done. The thing that bothered me about it was I didn't think of it and do it first. No, I'm kidding. That's a little. But what's worse is the person that pretends not to see you. This happens all the time. I hate to say it, but it's usually little old ladies that pretend not to see you. And the way I look at it is this: hey, you know what? It's harder for them to stand and to be up and around. And probably the reason they're doing it is not because they're selfish and think they're more important than everybody else. Probably the reason they're cutting in line is because they're probably going to pass out if they stand up any longer. And so they just got to get there in front of me. And so, anyway, so the little lady comes and she pretends not to see you. And so she's got her cart and she pushes it right. You're in line and there's 6 people behind you and there's a little gap where you've let so people can walk through the aisle, And she goes to that little gap and just kind of... And then turns around and looks at you like, I dare you say it. You know what I'm talking about? Like, I dare you look at me like I'm a little old lady that cut in line. But does that bother you when somebody cuts in line? The other day, and I think I told you folks about this, there was a fella at Walmart that my wife saw stealing. He was in a snack aisle and he slipped some things into his pocket. Now, I don't like when people steal. I think it's wrong, and I don't like paying for the theft of other people either, which is what you do when people get away with stealing at Walmart. It's built into the prices, and so it offends me that I have to pay extra money. So here's a man, he slips something into his pocket, And so my wife saw him. She said, that guy just stole. And so I started following him around and watching him. And of course, so he made a beeline for the cash register. So I get in line, and he heads there and goes all the way to some lady is checking out, and he goes through the line and goes to the lady that's the cashier, and she's checking people out. There's a long line of people, and he says, I need this right now, and he hands her something that he's going to buy, and he's got something in his pocket that he's stealing, and so he wants to get out of there because he knows I'm following him. And so I'm all the way in the back of the line, and I yell to the lady, and of course the people in the line are disgruntled. This man cut all the way to being the person in line, and customer's always right. What's she going to do? She's not going to. If she can't argue with the customer because he'll have him call out the manager, and so I just yelled, "He's a thief!" And I said he's not, and people thought I was talking about him being a thief because he stole their time for cutting in line. The guy's like, "That's exactly right. When you cut in line, that's what you're stealing other people's time." I said, "Yeah, he's a thief." I said, "He's not just stealing our time. He's got stolen stuff in his pockets." I said, "So check his pockets. He's a thief." And so he's there stealing, and of course he's getting nervous, and the lady's looking at him like, "Are you a thief?" And of course he is a thief. He knows he is. I said, "He's a thief. Check his pockets." So everybody in line is like, "Really? He's got some in his pockets?" I said, "Yeah. You see his bulging pocket there? He's stealing." And so everybody in line so he gets out of there, and the lady says, "Yeah, he comes in and steals all the time." Evidently that's their policy at Walmart, to let people steal. Well, anyway, you know what the people were more upset about was being cut in front of in line than somebody being a thief and getting away. If they'll steal from them, they'll steal from anybody. And they're stealing from you. It's not okay. But whether you care about it or not, you know what most people were upset about? They're upset about somebody cutting in front of them in line. Well, the Pharisees and the scribes are upset kind of for the same thing. They feel like somebody has supplanted them. Somebody is getting attention from Jesus, which means that Jesus thinks they're something. There's a lot of times when you want to spend time with somebody, you want them to talk to you because it makes you feel like, hey, I'm kind of important. And they know that these publicans and these sinners are wicked people, and they don't deserve Jesus' time. At least they thought enough of Jesus to think that. The publicans and sinners did not deserve Jesus' time. And Jesus is trying to teach something about heart's attitude, and we see, first of all, it illustrated in the 90 and 9. Jesus said, "What shepherd is okay with losing a sheep? What good shepherd is okay with losing a sheep?" My grandfather had a sheepdog. He was a border collie, and we were very well trained. And then out in the pasture, maybe a 250-acre pasture or so, they had a whole lot of sheep that would be out grazing. At the end of the day, my grandfather would tell the dog Tip, he'd say, "Tip, go get the sheep." And the sheep, and when the dog brought in the sheep, my grandpa would sit there and count them, and then maybe there'd be one left. He'd say, "Go get the ram," or "Go get whatever one was out there." And the dog would go out and hunt that sheep up and come back, dragging it by the ear or however he had to do it, and bring the sheep back. And you know what? My grandpa wasn't okay with leaving a sheep out for the coyotes to get. The coyotes, my dad was talking when we were in Kansas a couple weeks ago, he was talking about how when he was a kid, the coyotes would tease that dog. They would have one coyote that would come up by the sheep and act like he's trying to attack him, and then he'd take off running, and the dog would chase the sheep, and they'd be going up a hill. When they come to the top of the hill, all of a sudden the dog would turn around and be coming running back because the whole pack of coyotes was waiting for him there. And so, waiting, they're going to tear the dog apart, and then they'd be able to get the sheep. What good shepherd is okay with losing sheep? None. No good shepherd's okay with losing sheep. And friend, I have to say to you that this is sheds a lot of light on the heart of God with regards to you. You may have come to a place in your life when you think, you know what, God is through with me, or God is done with me, or I'm like one of the lost sheep, and I know it. I'm just going to be honest about it. I'm just going to say, I haven't honored God with my life. I haven't lived for God. I don't love God. I never have. And that's the way it is, and God shouldn't bother with me. Friend, can I say to you, God's not okay with you being lost. God's not all right with that. And that's the illustration of the Good Shepherd. Then there's another illustration. This is a lady that's lost a piece of silver. She has 10 pieces of silver. So first of all, we have a 1 to 100 ratio. And God says if there's one out of 100 lost, that one is very important to Him. And then we see a 1 to 10 ratio. What lady is there? She has 10 pieces of silver, and she loses one. Now let me ask you a question. What's a greater loss, 1 in 100 or 1 in 10? 1 in 10. I mean, the less you have, the more it means to you sometimes, doesn't it? You never see anyone more covetous than a poor person that wants to have some. I'm serious. There's covetous rich people and there's covetous poor people. And I'll tell you, some people will hold on to their scrap or their garbage or whatever their junk is because it's all they got. You know, I saw yesterday a sign with the man on the side of the road, and he said, I have nothing. I thought, well, at least I don't have to worry about losing anything.